Hi. At the end of the day, I always feel Hollywood is just trying to entertain. And every time I think Hollywood, or the Academy rather, will be sentimental and pick the sentimental favorite, they don't. With the diversity this year, do you think it has anything to do with the increase in the diversity of the Academy, the increase of members? And maybe those little bit of amount of members pushed it over to put these films out there?
Yeah, so I brought those numbers actually. So this year they invited 683 new members, 41% were people of color. That still only brings the overall membership of the Academy of people of color from 8 to 11%. So it's not a much more widely diverse Academy, but obviously that makes a difference, and they're committed to increasing diversity in the Academy generally over the next few years. So I don't think it's also, I don't think the Academy is the problem. There are many larger structural problems within the industry. There are actually fewer films made by women this year than last year. Although one thing that's been interesting is there are many more films that are in the top 100 in terms of blockbuster, top 100 grossing films that star women or people of color. So there is actually more diversity in front of the camera this year, and it hasn't hurt. In fact, it seems to have helped box office members.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think also the kind of shaming that happened last year probably impacted how, the full population of the Academy thought about how they were voting and what they were looking for, and, perhaps things that were unconscious, biases that were unconscious became a little more conscious as a result of all the discussion last year, so that could be part of it. I think, as with academic diversity efforts, I think with, diversity, this idea of increased diversity within the Academy and within the Oscars, I think it's important to always ask what kinds of structural changes or ways of thinking change at a kind of fundamental way, in addition to having, statistics that improve, and, I don't see that happening much.
Yeah. Austria also mentioned one project I really love. I was on a panel with Penn alum Stacy Schneider, and she was asked why more women didn't direct blockbusters. And she said there are, as films budgets get more expensive, fewer films are made. There are fewer people in the pipeline in general who they can trust with films of that size. And she didn't have a good answer for this, but then a few months later, Fox developed this project with the American Film Institute Women's Directing program, a really terrific program, lots of great directors could come out of it. And they allowed graduates of the program to propose projects, short films that would use the Fox franchises. So there'd be more women and they agreed to produce 2 or 3 of these, and so there'd be more women in the pipeline who had experiences making franchise films, even if they're shorts, and then possibly would be in the pipeline for later. I mean, it's a great small targeted experiment, but I can see that expanding much more broadly to film schools, to amateur creators.
Because right now there's only Catherine Bigelow, right, who has done.
And Anna DeMarco.
Ava DeMarco.
Yeah, but she's more an independent.
Well, she's doing Wrinkle in Time. And that's huge. And I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
And she may be an Academy Award winner this year.
Yeah.
13 is definitely.
I mean, the documentary category is really interesting this year. I think it's going to be interesting to see how those conversations emerge.
Yeah. So a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, Michael Moore greatly expanded the number of films that could be eligible for Academy Awards. I know from people in the Academy, they found it now overwhelming. It's really hard to see all the documentaries, and there are hundreds that you have to watch in order to vote. But it definitely has expanded the kinds of films that end up making it.
So you talked about several of the films nominated for Best Picture, but you didn't talk about all of them. So I was just wondering if you'd. I wonder if you would just comment on the other. I think there's 9 that are nominated.
Yep.
Several you didn't mention. I was just curious to hear thoughts.
So I haven't seen some of them, so I can't comment on all of them.
I've seen, I didn't see Hacksaw Ridge, and so I have nothing to say about Mel Gibson's movies. Fences is I loved the play. I really, really liked the movie. I don't know if it's, I think Denzel Washington's going to beat Casey Affleck. That's my gut on that. That's going to be my vote. And I think Arrival, I really liked Arrival as well. I think that was actually released too early in terms of Oscar competition. It has, people really like that movie a lot.
It's very smart.
It's a, yeah, it's a smart, it makes you think kind of, it's a movie that would normally be rewarded, I mean, it is rewarded by its Best Picture nomination, but that Amy Adams wasn't nominated means to me that some of the interest had waned.
I think it should get cinematography.
Yeah.
It's a great
Bradford Young, too, right?
Yes, Bradford Young.
Great.
But again, science fiction, it's always editing, effects, cinematography,
Right.
Yeah.
never writing, acting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting to think about, well, like when we talk about the Best Picture category, given the way that we divide all these other elements of the film, what are we voting on? Like, or how are we deciding? Like, is it a kind of total gut feeling, or, is there a particular element that isn't, are we kind of in a way excluding some of these things,
Or using our own biases
Right.
for that, right?
Or
Like
voting on
it.
something else that really has nothing to do with the film, like a kind of poll on race or a poll on a certain political position, or, like what happens with that vote when we think about what the best is, I think is.
I always have that gut
Interesting
feeling,
question.
like when you hear, like to me, sorry, but like when I hear that La La Land's going to sweep, my gut is that's not a Best Picture. I mean, it's just that's a gut thing. It's just not a Best Picture. I felt the same way. I didn't think Argo was Best Picture.
Right.
I think.
So of these, which one do you think? I mean, I look at these, like I would probably vote for, well, we do vote in cinema studies. We have our own private poll. I always vote with my heart, and I always come last. So I think I voted for Moonlight for Best Picture, but I don't think it will win, and maybe I don't think it should win. Do I have that gut feeling like this is a Best Picture? I don't feel like that about it, but I would like it if it won for various reasons, for the kind of cinematography, for the kind of time that it makes space for the viewer, for the way that it deals with the mode of storytelling,
And
the
it
acting.
cost very little money.
Right.
It was made for what, 5 million?
Yeah.
Right.
Very small budget.
But really, for me, I would be voting there for, like, what would it mean about this country if something like this could be deemed to be the best? It would be a different kind of country. So that's kind of how I vote. Like, it would be great. But I think it's a little elusive how we think about this Best Picture category in general. And I don't see any of the films on here as, I mean, sometimes I think in the history of the Oscars, there is a film where you're like, of course that was going to win that year. But I don't see any of these having that kind of status as an experience of a film.
But to me, Moonlight does stand out as a whole.
Yeah.
I think so,
all
out
the
of
other,
this list, right?
I really liked Hidden Figures. I think it has a potential to win a screenplay. It's a great screenplay. I like Fences, but then again, it's a very stagey film. I think it belongs on the stage. It wasn't quite translated into a film.
Performance.
Yeah.
But as a film, when you look at it as a whole, I think Moonlight to me stands out. So
Did anybody see
agree.
Lion?
I actually haven't seen
I haven't
that.
seen that.
Yeah.
So I will say that the way the Academy works is people,
Slumdog Millionaire.
people are members of a part of the Academy, and so cinematographers vote on the cinematography award, editors vote on the editing award. But Best Picture is where everyone comes together and can vote. So it's the way that Hollywood tends to vote as a block, and is thinking about a film that's not just about something within their own area of expertise, but that they enjoy, that they want to represent the industry. I wonder, is Trump also a member of the Academy, or just a member of SAG? If he's voting, I want to take back my...
Wow, that is a good question. He can't.
No, he's
he
very
can't
unlikely.
be in the Academy.
He could be, but it's unlikely. It's definitely unlikely.
Wow. Yeah.
Should we talk about a different category, or should we open some
there's
more
a question.
questions?
Question about acting. What is it about a British accent that tends to win? Not this year, but if you look, when they were talking about the lack of diversity, that's what I was like, well, that's an overrepresented small country that seems like all you have to do is have a period piece with a British accent and you win.
Right.
So
Right.
has there ever been a study like that?
I'm hoping that gets it for James Baldwin this year, because when he's like speaking to the Cambridge Union, you know, he's got like, this is great footage of him, but there is a kind of like that neutral accent from American actors when you know, but there's something that Baldwin has of that in some of that footage. But
Yeah, I mean, sort of during the golden sort of era of Hollywood, any foreigner was played by someone with a British accent. You could be from any country, but that just signified foreignness.
It's kind of
But I-
indicative of the notion of diversity in Hollywood, that's as far as we can go, right?
But I actually think it has more to do with this idea of a genre, an Oscar genre, or I know Oscar bait that that Meadow was
Yes,
describing.
yes. You mean
And
like
that's
the
a piece of the
Redmayne or the,
that's a piece of the formula.
That's a piece of the puzzle,
well, we
yeah.
have Noah here in the audience, Noah Eisenberg, who just gave us a talk a couple of weeks ago where he talked a lot about accents, so I think he would be a good person to do it.
Noah has a terrific new book that just came out last Tuesday, last Tuesday, called We'll Always Have Casablanca, and it's a history of Casablanca, and also the story of the film's afterlife.
All four of you obviously received the envelope with the unmarked $100 bills. As for accents, I don't really have a response. The accent question today, we don't have as many foreign-born actors in Hollywood as we did in the 1940s, that's for sure. And yet there still are quite a number of foreign-born. My question was that I was going to raise has nothing at all to do with this. It's one of the films, and Kathy, I think it's only in the screenplay category that it's been nominated, is Mike Mills' 20th Century Women, which is a lovely, very quiet film. Annette Bening, her performance is extraordinary. She got overlooked. Maybe she's deemed insufficiently youthful for the nomination. I'm not sure. In any case, I was curious about that, and I was curious about how that stacks up in terms of screenplays. As for the accent question, I don't really, I mean, I like your notion that you deliver your lines with an Oxbridge accent, and you have a good chance of being recognized by the Academy. I'll go with it. But maybe you could speak a bit, if you would, about 20th Century Women, because that's another film. I haven't seen every film. I've seen, Moonlight, and I'm equally smitten with it, as it seems that a number of you on the panel are. But I'd be curious to hear about your take on 20th Century Women.
20th Century Women is a fantastic, fantastic screenplay. I haven't seen the movie. I've only read the screenplay. And I think what hurt it, or there's a couple, I'm thinking about, you brought up Annette Bening. I believe that, gosh, I don't even want to comment on the accent. I have to tell my accent story first. It's just a quick accent story, which is that I used to work as a producer, and also I had, as a writer, I had sold a book to a British editor named Jonathan Burnham. He's the head of HarperCollins now. But he has this wonderful British accent. And he, at the time, worked under Harvey Weinstein at Miramax. And he said, Kathy, I can't speak in any British accent, but he's like, Kathy, I could say anything to Harvey, and Harvey will say yes. and so I just passed that along to you as some kind of a, he's one of the reigning bosses in the film world, and I think for, that might be part of the reason for that. Yeah. All right, so 20th Century Women, and I think with the acting and Annette Bening, I mean, you have these showy performances by Natalie Portman and Emma Stone, and Annette Bening and she's not, she's, oh my gosh, in her 50s, terrible. And they take up the spot for her, and she's not a showy performer. She's just a fantastic performer. And you put Meryl Streep in. Meryl Streep checks the box. So I guess I'm talking about what you had said earlier, Peter, about how that when people vote, like they're considering all these things, like, oh, my older woman vote, well, that's going to Meryl. So Annette Bening gets left out. In terms of the movie is, the script anyway, is just wonderful. I mean, to have a female lead and watch her transform the way that she does with the relationship she has with her child, and other people in the film. I mean, as a screenwriting teacher and as someone who just appreciates great writing and storytelling without any bells and whistles, that's it. That's the gold ring. That's the golden ring. It's really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
Speaking of Certain Women by Kelly Reichardt is also, and it's completely
wonderful.
overlooked. I think
Right.
it's a brilliant, also very quiet, very understated, but fantastic film.
And doesn't have that, like I think of Hidden Figures, which is written by women, which is
Yeah.
great. And and I've been trying to explain this. I took my kids to see Hidden Figures, and they liked it. It was great. It's a great family movie. It's listen, there's a glossiness to it. You know, there's that 20th century women doesn't have, that certain women doesn't have.
Yeah,
there's a glibness, even though
studio look.
Yeah, I don't mean to
Yeah.
disparage it. I mean, I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I just think there's a glossy Hollywoodization of it, and maybe it's what you were talking about, that it makes it's acceptable, or maybe it was meta. You know, it's not controversial, but it's in that space, right? That we can a new story, and look how great it is, and look how great we are that we're doing this. So.
I mean, I'd say about 20th century women. I thought it was great to see Annette Bening do this tour de force of acting and hold the screen for so long. I felt like as a film, like in terms of why it might not be in the best picture, I felt like it needed editing. It could have been shorter. I felt like there was a lot of repetition. It started to become predictable, like with the girl coming down from the room. It's like, oh, she's on the scaffolding again, you know. That there were those kinds of things. But I was thinking a lot about Annette Bening in relation to thinking about the actress in the leading role and why she's not in there. And thinking about her in relation to Isabella Rossellini, who really is the exception to my rule that I don't think in terms of categories of the best, because she clearly is the best. And I love her. But both of those women there are in roles where they are older women. They are women who have sexual desire in one way or another, where they are super intelligent and are defiant about their intelligence. And for one of them to be on an Oscar list is, I think, itself an accomplishment. And but the question of why Bening doesn't make it onto that list, and I was watching and I thought this is really something else in terms of an acting performance. But I felt sure that people were going to be having so many mother complexes as they were watching the film that she would never, that. So in terms of why we are, what we're voting on and how people react to films and what makes them, is it possible to separate one's own personal experiences from how you vote on a performance? Like, how objective can you be when you're analyzing a performance? I think that's, something that, affects roles like that. I also just wanted to comment on, Kathy, you said Hidden Figures is a great family movie, and it reminded me that in the course of the year, I got an email from one of my students who's working on queer cinema, and he wrote to me and he's like, Karen, you have to go to see The Lobster, and you have to go see it with your kids. It's an awesome family movie. And for me, it is a great family movie in the sense that I feel like, this question that James Baldwin asks in I Am Not Your Negro, where he says, the race question is not a problem for the black man. That's a whole other question, but it's a problem for America. I feel like the family is the same thing, that the question of what we consider to be appropriate for families is part of the problem of why, we're perpetuating some of the values that we're perpetuating. And it seems to me that The Lobster is a film that really opens up that question of what are the basic structures of our kinship relations, and what would it mean to throw that wide open for reconsideration and imagine completely changing how we relate to each other in a different way. And to me, that's a pretty great question for a film to act and play out. And it's a great thought experiment, and I like that kind of family movie.
Did you take Bruno?
I had a question about your thoughts on the acting races, especially the leading actor and leading actress races, and whether politics would be involved with that. I guess the front runner for Best Actress is Emma Stone. Do you think her win is definitely a part of the La La Land sweep, or do you think that it does hold its own against people like Natalie Portman and Isabelle Huppert? And also in terms of Best Actor, I'm curious to know why you think Denzel Washington would win against Casey Affleck, seeing as Casey Affleck did sweep the BAFTAs and the Globes.
I'm not sure about that, but it seems to me that there has been a consistent effort to remind people of his sexual harassment scandals in his past, and I think that has had an impact. And when Denzel won the, what did he win? SAG Award? The SAG Award? People love him. I don't know why I called him Denzel. I don't know him. I wish I knew him. But, Denzel Washington. But I just think that he's going to be somebody who has such goodwill in Hollywood and among actors. And I would, even though I think people recognize, I think Casey Affleck delivers a really phenomenal performance in Manchester by the Sea. But I just think Denzel Washington, Mr. Washington, is going to win that. And I don't think, I can't believe Emma Stone would, I mean, I know that she's favored, but I think I just try to block that out. Because it just seems crazy.
And she does, I think she carries the film. I think without her, La La Land would be completely flat. Like, she's the one character for me in the film that has, some
that's true.
dimension.
That's true, but
still,
Best Actress, like
I know.
that's-
But I feel like this category, I think what you asked is that it's not so much evaluated on that particular performance, but it's almost, I feel like
a whole
oftentimes
career
it's like,
award.
it's a life
Right.
achievement
Yeah.
award. And I think
she's
for
20,
Denzel,
so she deserves a life achievement.
yeah, I think Casey Affleck, I think, deserves it for this role, but I think for, Denzel, he's been better in a lot of other films than Fences. I think this performance is a great performance, but it's a stagey performance. It's very
It's hard to
over.
direct.
What
in
about,
that.
It's very overacted.
What about
but-
Viggo Mortensen? We haven't talked about him, but I
He's
thought he was
fantastic.
great in Captain Fantastic.
Let's just
Yeah.
talk about
Fantastic.
him. Let's just talk. Is my husband here? Sorry.
Yeah, but like people with British accents tending to win, best actors and actresses often it's about something tangible that you can point to. Someone's lost weight or overcome something.
Pregnant.
Yeah, and so Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling had to learn how to play the piano and learn how to dance and sing, and so it looks like there's some kind of tangible skill I think, that's been acquired.
Right. But there's so many people who can play the piano. I don't know, I feel like.
And better, but I'm trying to
I mean, there is, with Emma Stone and Natalie Portman, and there's a whole group of actresses of this age group who share a quality of a kind of blankness and an ability to be a type of cipher on screen where there's very little affect and very little sense of personality that comes through the role that I think is part of what is appealing about them for a certain kind of femininity. And I hate that about their personas and their acting style because I think that it idealizes an absence of being that I don't want to be idealized, and is the opposite of somebody like Isabelle Huppert, I think, and Meryl Streep and Annette Bening. But
did you see
I
Loving?
didn't see Loving.
I didn't see
no.
Loving either.
I didn't see Loving.
She's supposed to be fantastic in that.
Yeah.
Wish I had seen that.
What do you think? Yeah.
I personally would not have voted for Stone. I'd be happy if she wins. And I also would not have voted for Casey Affleck. I don't think that Denzel Washington. But I do think that, given that he's won twice already, I do think that the Oscars would have a penalty on that. So they might.
For Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
But I mean, the last time he did win was like probably 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So.
Training Day, wasn't that?
Training Day was the last.
Is it that long ago? Okay.
And it raises an interesting question of, whether you should have a cap on the number of Oscars you're allowed to win. And in that case, then, are we voting or talking about who's the best, or is it something else? If it starts to bring in democratic principles, so then the whole thing starts to crumble.
Then I'll just give more to that overrated Meryl Streep again. Just
For the 25th time or something.
overrated. Sad.
I have a question about the short films. I've been going to the live-action short films for the last 5 years or so, and I'm always just so impressed by the issues that are covered, the stories that are told, and most of all, the different ways of looking at the world. I mean, our films, for the most part, are very American-centric, and I just feel so exposed to other ways of thinking when I go to these. What can we do to bring more of them to mass audiences? Is there a way to have them to have those instead of some of the previews or trailers? Or, I mean, film festivals are not always that easy to find or to go to or to even learn about, and I think that there's a wider audience for these kinds of films, but people just don't know about them.
Yeah, so I agree. I love the short films. When we take students to the Cannes Film Festival, which we do every year, the Tribeca Film Festival, we always make sure we go to the short films, which are often some of the best films of the entire festivals. And it used to be that they would come to festivals, maybe someone would see them, and it was a calling card, and you could go on to make a feature. I mean, it used to be that all films had shorts before them, and in the 50s and 60s and through the 60s. But actually today there's more of a market online and audience for short films than ever. I love the New York Times OpDoc series, and one of them is nominated this year for a Short Academy Award. And there's usually one or two, even two sometimes, that are nominated. The Guardian has a great short film series. A lot of them are for sale now on iTunes. But actually the audience for short films has really exploded. You can still go to local theaters. The Ritz will show them, the Bryn Mawr movie theater will show them. But online, you can see many, many short films.
Right.
So, yeah.
And a lot of the issue that you point to with the short film has to do with the status in the U.S. of short film being associated with a calling card as a stepping stone into something greater, not as an art form in itself. So I think it's much more present in Europe, and you have established feature filmmakers that use short film form as a challenge, and they see it kind of in their own right. So hopefully with kind of new systems of distribution and exhibition, more accessibility, that status of what short film is and what it represents will change. But I think you're right. We see the diversity, the innovativeness, the kind of exposure to different worldviews in short films a lot more than we do in feature films. So I agree.
I'll say I learned a lot about the short film market last year. I made a short film that was 7 minutes long, but that is like the Lawrence of Arabia of online short films. And most of the places I wanted to show it said that it was too long.
Yeah, it does raise a question, I think, about expectations and standardization within the film experience, and how we, to what extent we're capable collectively of opening up those expectations, and how the Oscars reward creativity and the breaking of expectations on the one hand, but also maintain those expectations with the categories that they have and things like that, by keeping, the short film category rather than having the best film category be open to all kinds of films, right? So there are things about the structure of the Oscars and combined with the sense that we're rewarding some kind of novelty or innovation that I think are interesting to think about together. I think that's true with, innovation is a big part of Penn's own stated mission. And I think there are, types of innovation that are welcome and recognizable, and there are types of innovation that are too surprising or too different from what we want that count negatively, like it's unwanted innovation. And I think more discussion around the values that underlie how we celebrate innovation would be really useful here as well as in the film industry.
For foreign feature film, right, that category, or foreign language, that's an interesting one as well. And I think Oscars is way overdue to update that. I think they still have national committees, right, pick a film. Like festivals have gotten rid of that rule since the early 1960s. So I think it's really ridiculous that you have...
Especially given the diversity of the language cultures in the U.S. And,
No, so I would just echo what Karen was saying. That there's so much experimentation in the kinds of ways that stories are told now. The ideas of movies or TV shows are kind of anachronistic, almost as metaphors now. The kind of BBC model of a story that's told as a short, basically like 3 or 4 hour long or 2 hour long segments is really taking over American TV and Netflix, Amazon. And so in some ways the Oscars are really holding on to a pretty outmoded category of what a movie is. And so I'd love to see that opened up. So I think we're going to give Jen the last question.
I was just wondering, as far as like people think it's kind of maybe a little crazy that Emma Stone is like has so much fire behind her going into this, but I didn't really get a clear read on who you think might win or should win in her place. And also like going onto that, like how can you really compare the role that Emma Stone played in La La Land versus like the role that Isabelle Huppert played in Elle, because they're insanely like vastly different, and how do you look at like those two great performances and kind of compare them and say like who did better when they're so like the cinema and the roles are just like absolutely in contrast to each other.
Yeah. Well, I have to say I kind of hated the film Elle, as if like I did not like the screenplay, but I thought that Isabella Rossellini brought an intelligence and a subtlety to the acting that I would be part of what I think she brings it to all of her roles, and has a way of commanding the screen in the quietest ways and the most subtle ways. In the way I think she's in full command of the actor's physical and verbal vocabulary. And I think she's also a generous actress with other people on the screen, and so that the way that she interacts with others. So that would be my choice and why I would choose her. And I think that Emma Stone also didn't have a fine script to work with, but didn't bring that kind of, and didn't bring something special to it.
I wish I had seen Elle. I don't like that director at all, and I kind of have. That's why I haven't seen it. But so I can't. I've heard similar things to what Karen just said. Where's the actress? And I haven't seen Loving. I just don't see Natalie Portman or Emma Stone as they. I just think. I think Emma Stone winning I think Best Actress should be. That's the prime goal, right? To win that and to win it for La La Land, or it's just it doesn't have the gravitas. It doesn't have she's the best in it. I agree with that, but I just don't. What? Well, it should always be Meryl, but that's sorry. Overrated. I forgot. I think that I haven't seen enough of the performances, except I can tell you that in my opinion, I do not believe neither Jackie nor Emma Stone's role, in my opinion, deserves the Best Actress win.
But Emma Stone was given such a horrible script, and the fact that she did something with it, I think, is an achievement in itself. And that screenplay is really horrendous. I think it's outrageous
that it won whatever it won.
That it's nominated.
Okay, so this was really fun. I'm going to give Annette the last word as always. We can meet back here on Monday and see how we did a prediction.
Some more trash talk.